They said I was too ugly to be loved. Those words still echo in my head like a broken record I can't turn off. My stepmom spat them at me one night during dinner, with my stepsiblings snickering in the background, their eyes scanning me like I was a mistake that didn't belong in their picture-perfect family. At 29, I should be able to brush it off, but those scars don't just fade. They burn. They shape you. Before I continue, please take a second to subscribe to this channel and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Your support helps us share more true stories of betrayal, karma, and the sweetest revenge. Now, let me take you back to how it all began. When I was 11, my dad remarried. He was so happy, beaming like a teenager in love, that I wanted to be happy for him too. But when my stepmom moved in, she brought 2 children of her own, my new stepsister, Hannah, and my stepbrother, Mark. From the very beginning, I knew I wasn't welcome. Hannah was everything I wasn't. Blonde, slim with big blue eyes and a smile that made people instantly like her. She was just a year older than me, and everyone compared us. Teachers, neighbors, even relatives at family gatherings would pat her on the head and say she's so beautiful just like her mother. Then they'd glance at me and quickly look away, as if avoiding an unpleasant sight. My stepmom fed off those comparisons. She would call me plain, sometimes even awkward. She never said it like a joke, it was always sharp, deliberate, meant to cut. I remember her leaning across the table once, telling my dad, "Don't you worry about Charlotte. She's not going to attract trouble with boys, not with that face." My dad laughed. He actually laughed. By the time I was 15, Hannah had boys writing her notes, waiting for her after class, carrying her books to school. Mark was popular, too athletic, confident, loud. And me? I was the invisible one. But sometimes invisibility wasn't enough. One afternoon, Hannah hosted a party. She invited the entire class, even some boys from the football team. I wasn't invited, of course, but since I lived there, I had no choice but to stay in my room. I remember sitting on my bed, trying to drown out the music and laughter with a pillow over my head. But then I heard my name. "Charlotte?" "Oh, don't worry about her," Hannah said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She's upstairs. But trust me, nobody's interested. She's too ugly to be loved." The room erupted in laughter. I pressed the pillow tighter, tears streaming down my face, wishing the ground would swallow me whole. It didn't stop there. At family dinners, my stepmom would make sly comments about how I shouldn't eat too much if I ever wanted someone to like me. Hannah would post pictures on social media, tagging me in the worst angles she could find, with captions like #sistersbutdifferent. Mark joined in too, calling me the family charity case. Their words built a prison around me. I stopped looking people in the eye. I stopped trying to dress nicely. Every time I thought of liking someone, my stepmom's voice would play in my head, "No man will ever want you." And I believed her. I believed all of them. I carried that pain into adulthood. Even as I worked hard, even as I tried to build a life of my own, their voices haunted me. Birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, they never missed a chance to remind me of what they thought I was: too ugly, too unwanted, too unworthy of love. But one evening, something shifted. I was 27, sitting in the living room after another dinner filled with cutting remarks. Hannah was bragging about her boyfriend, some wealthy guy who showered her with gifts. Mark was talking about his latest promotion. My stepmom smiled proudly at both of them, then turned to me. "And Charlotte?" she asked sweetly, her voice dripping with poison. "Still single?" No surprise there. Some women just aren't meant to be loved. Hannah laughed. Mark smirked. My dad said nothing. I excused myself, went to my room and shut the door. But instead of crying, something inside me snapped. For the first time in my life, I felt a strange, burning anger. Not at them but at myself, for letting their words define me for so long. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself, not at the flaws they always pointed out, but at me. My dark hair, my brown eyes, my strong jawline. I wasn't ugly. I was just me. And maybe they couldn't see my worth, but that didn't mean it wasn't there. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would no longer let them control my story. I would no longer sit silently while they tore me apart. I would rise, piece by piece, even if it took years. And one day, I would make them regret every cruel word. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when. But I could feel it in my bones. Change was coming. And little did I know, my revenge would be sweeter than I ever imagined. After that night when my stepmom mocked me at the dinner table, something inside me shifted. For years I had accepted their words as truth, letting their cruelty define me. But that evening, as I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I realized I had been living in the shadows of their lies. And I was done. The first step wasn't glamorous. I didn't suddenly wake up looking different. I didn't suddenly feel confident. In fact, at first it was terrifying. I joined a gym and for weeks I felt awkward, convinced everyone was staring at me. But each day I showed up anyway, even if all I could do was walk on the treadmill. Slowly, my body grew stronger. I started eating healthier not because I wanted to fit their standards, but because I wanted to feel alive in my own skin. For the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and saw progress, not flaws. But transformation isn't only physical. I knew I needed more. I poured myself into my work. I had been stuck in an assistant role at a small company for years, too timid to ask for promotions, too scared to believe I deserved more. But now, something was different. I volunteered for projects. I spoke up in meetings. I stayed late, not because I wanted approval, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I was capable. It wasn't easy. I failed sometimes. I embarrassed myself more than once. But I kept going. And little by little, my boss began to notice. Within a year, I was promoted. Then promoted again. By 28, I was leading my own team. I started traveling for work, meeting people outside the bubble of my toxic family. People who didn't look at me with disdain. People who saw me for my ideas, my energy, my drive. And slowly, my confidence grew. But the biggest change came when I least expected it. It was during a business conference in another city. I had been asked to give a short presentation on leadership, a terrifying prospect for someone who once hid from the spotlight. My palms were sweaty, my heart was pounding, but I walked on stage anyway. I spoke about resilience, about overcoming obstacles, about finding strength when the world tries to break you. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. And that's when I saw him. He was standing near the back, tall, striking, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to notice everything. He clapped harder than anyone, his gaze never leaving mine. After the session, he walked straight up to me. "You were incredible," he said, his voice deep and steady. "I could listen to you speak all day." I laughed nervously, unsure how to respond. Compliments had always felt foreign to me, like they were meant for someone else. But he didn't look away. He didn't treat me like I was invisible. "My name's Daniel," he said, holding out his hand. From that moment, everything changed. Daniel wasn't just kind, he was brilliant. A successful entrepreneur, respected in his field, admired by everyone who knew him. He had the kind of charisma that drew people in, but he wasn't arrogant. He was grounded, thoughtful, and when he looked at me, I felt seen in a way I never had before. We started talking after the conference, then texting, then calling. What began as casual conversations quickly deepened into something more. Daniel asked questions nobody had ever cared to ask me. He wanted to know about my dreams, my fears, my past. And when I finally told him about my stepmom and siblings, the years of being called ugly, unwanted, unlovable, he didn't flinch. Instead, he cupped my face in his hands and said, "Charlotte, they were wrong. You are extraordinary." For the first time in my life, I believed it. Months passed and our relationship grew stronger. Daniel wasn't just a boyfriend, he was a partner. He celebrated my victories, stood by me in struggles, and reminded me daily that I was worthy of love. With him, I didn't feel like the broken girl my family had painted me to be. I felt whole. And then, one evening under the glow of city lights, he got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered yes. I couldn't believe it. Me, the girl my stepmom said was too ugly to be loved, was engaged to a man who was not only successful and admired but deeply in love with me. But there was more. Daniel was the kind of man my stepmom and siblings had always dreamed of for themselves. Hannah had dated guys like him but never managed to hold on to them. My stepmom bragged constantly about wanting high-value men in the family. And here he was mine. As we started planning the wedding, I couldn't help but imagine their faces when they found out. I could picture my stepmom's fake smile freezing, Hannah's eyes widening in disbelief, Mark whispering behind clenched teeth. The very people who told me no one would ever love me would be forced to watch me walk down the aisle to a man they could never have. The thought alone was delicious. But the reality would be even better. I decided I wouldn't tell them right away. No, I wanted it to be a surprise. They hadn't earned the right to know about my happiness. Instead, I let them continue believing their own lies. I kept my distance, answering their occasional calls with polite vagueness. But deep down, I was counting down the days. The day they would finally see me not as the girl they mocked, not as the burden they ridiculed, but as the bride they could never become. And when that day came, I promised myself, I would hold my head high and let karma do the talking. The morning of my wedding felt unreal. The sunlight poured through the curtains like a spotlight, illuminating the dress that hung in the corner of the room. It wasn't extravagant or dripping in diamonds, but it was elegant, timeless, just like I wanted. As the makeup artist worked on me, I barely recognized the reflection in the mirror. My hair cascaded in soft curls, my eyes sparkled, and for once, I didn't see the girl who had been mocked for years. I saw a woman confident, radiant, loved. The venue was a beautiful garden draped in flowers, with an aisle lined by lanterns that glowed softly even in the afternoon sun. Guests began to arrive, laughter and chatter filling the air. And then, I saw them. My stepmom, Hannah, and Mark. They walked in like they owned the place, heads held high, already scanning the crowd for gossip. Hannah wore a tight dress that screamed for attention, while my stepmom clung to her arm as though they were the stars of the show. Mark trailed behind, his eyes darting around like he was searching for familiar faces. I held my breath, hidden from view as I watched their expressions shift. Because then they saw him, Daniel, standing at the altar in his tailored suit, exuding quiet power and charm. He greeted guests warmly, shook hands, and smiled the kind of smile that made people gravitate toward him. And in that instant, I knew they recognized it, the man they had always said I could never have. The man they secretly dreamed of, but who had chosen me. Hannah's mouth fell open. My stepmom's smile faltered. Mark muttered something under his breath, his jaw tightening. They hadn't expected this. Not me. Not Charlotte, the ugly one, walking down the aisle to a man like Daniel. The music started, and the crowd rose to their feet. My heart pounded as I stepped forward, my dress sweeping the ground, every eye on me. But this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't hide. I walked with my head high, each step erasing years of shame, each glance from the guests reminding me that I was no longer the girl they had broken down. I was a bride. I was loved. And when I reached Daniel, his eyes glistened with pride and love so raw it made my chest ache. He took my hand and whispered, "You look breathtaking." I knew my stepmom heard it. I knew Hannah did too. And the satisfaction was sweeter than I could have ever imagined. The ceremony flowed like a dream. The vows, the laughter, the tears, it was everything I had ever wanted. But every so often, I'd catch sight of my stepmom shifting uncomfortably, Hannah fidgeting, Mark glaring. Their discomfort wasn't loud, but it was there. And I savored every second. Then came the reception. Guests clinked glasses, music filled the air, and people lined up to congratulate us. My stepmom approached, her smile stretched so thin it looked painful. "Charlotte," she said, her voice strained. This is unexpected." I smiled back sweetly. "Why?" "Because you always said I was too ugly to be loved." Her face paled, the fake smile vanishing. Hannah gasped, eyes wide. Mark shifted uncomfortably. I leaned closer, my voice calm but steady. "Well, here I am, married to the man of your dreams. Funny how life works, isn't it?" For once, they had nothing to say. No insults, no laughter, just silence. The same silence I had once endured, but now it was theirs to carry. Daniel joined me then, slipping his arm around my waist. He kissed my temple, oblivious to the tension but protective all the same. The sight of him holding me, so openly in love, was the final blow. Hannah looked away, her jaw clenched. My stepmom muttered something about needing a drink and stalked off. Mark disappeared into the crowd. I didn't chase after them. I didn't need to. My revenge wasn't about shouting or humiliating them publicly. It was about living the life they swore I never could. It was about standing there, radiant and loved, while they choked on their own bitterness. Later that night, as the stars twinkled above and the dance floor filled with laughter, I found a quiet corner with Daniel. He pulled me close, his hand warm against mine, and whispered, "You deserve all of this. Don't ever forget that." I smiled, tears brimming in my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I had finally broken free. The girl who was once too ugly to be loved had become the woman they could never overshadow. And my revenge? It wasn't just marrying Daniel. It was knowing that every time my stepmom, Hannah, and Mark closed their eyes, they would remember this day. They would remember the moment their cruel words turned to dust and karma handed me the victory. As the night drew to a close, I took one last look at them. My stepmom sulking in a corner, Hannah pretending to be busy on her phone, Mark nursing a drink. They looked so small, so defeated. And I felt nothing but peace. Because I had won. The sweetest revenge isn't loud. It isn't cruel, it's simply living well when everyone swore you couldn't. And that's exactly what I did. They said I was too ugly to be loved, but there I was married, radiant, cherished by a man who adored me. And they had to watch it all unfold. And I wouldn't trade that satisfaction for anything. So, what about you? Have you ever been mocked, underestimated, or told you weren't enough only to prove everyone wrong? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of betrayal, resilience, and the sweetest revenge.